Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Good evening, parents and students. If you're out there also, welcome to our annual college information night. I'm honored to welcome all of you as the superintendent principal of University High School. I'm Mrs. Hickman. Similar to the decision that you may have made for your family when your son or daughter chose to or decided to come to University High rather than their neighborhood school, choosing whether to attend college and what college to go to is probably the next big decision that your family may be making. First off, does your child want to go to college? And if so, where do they want to go? What does he or she want to do later in life? How much does college cost? How does the application process work? So these are all of the questions I'm sure that you're probably asking yourself. And that's what this presentation is for. And then also due to COVID and due to the pandemic, things have changed. And so we have our counselors here to help you answer all of those questions that you may have. And it's difficult to maneuver through all of this information. So hopefully we can give you some helpful tips. But before you start that college search, I suggest that maybe you start at the beginning and get back to basics, so to speak, with some simple tips. So the first one is ask and listen. What are your son or daughter's hopes and dreams? What makes them happy? Help them to articulate their strengths and their hopes and their aspirations so it leads to their goals and their expectations and self-acceptance about what they want. The next tip is explore and practice. This pandemic has led some teens to be really creative and resourceful, and it has made others to be very anxious and depressed. So encourage your teen to explore their skills and try out some new ones. Help them to have the courage to try some new things and experiences, which in turn can give them some strength and confidence. Lastly, believe in them. We have to set aside our own strengths and desires and beliefs and allow them to achieve their dreams. Our students were born with cell phones in their hands. I was 25 years old when I got my first cell phone, but they've lived a completely different life than we have. Theirs has been full of technology and instant access and feedback. So if their dream sounds a little odd or a little different than the norm or than what you want or what you're used to, then ask them to tell you about it. It's important that we listen and support their dreams, for that's what fuels their achievement and their success. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I hope this information is helpful. I'm very proud to introduce our counselors to you tonight that are giving this presentation. Before I do though, just to let you know, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A rather than in the chat box, and we will be monitoring the Q&A all night long. We can stop along the way if there gets to be a lot of questions, but afterwards we will answer all of the questions. If there are questions that can be answered for the whole group, we'll wait and hold those for the whole group, but if it's something specific, we may just answer you in the Q&A privately to you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our counselors, Mrs. Bird and Mrs. Fernandez. They've been working tirelessly to help the students of UHS with their academics, their mental and emotional health, and planning for their futures. So please join me in welcoming them to this presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Hickman, and we really appreciate you and all that you're doing for our school and behind the scenes. We definitely are happy to be part of this team at UHS and being behind you as you guide us in this, upcoming months, depending on what schools are doing and reopening plans, which we know will be coming soon. So we are definitely thankful to be under your leadership. And I know our parents and students, we all feel like we are a family and this is a village. And so Mrs. Fernandez and I, as we were putting together this particular presentation, we were like, what do our parents and students really need to know right now? And there's been so many changes in college admissions. And we keep getting wind of all of these. Colleges send us pretty much every day some information regarding these changes. A lot have to do with, of course, the pandemic, but even just as things are changing, like Mrs. Hickman said, like technology and this ability to go online. Many colleges are now using that as their platform to delivering thousands of classes that they weren't probably able to do before. So it definitely changes the outlook, and we wanted to make sure that we are always on the front of any of these changes so we can provide you. Of course, you always get your individual counseling conferences that we do at every grade level but the freshman year. And of course, we're always available to meet, especially after this. If you feel like you have other questions, specific questions, please reach out to myself and Mrs. Fernandez. But we're going to go ahead and get going and just kind of highlighting some of these changes and what that means for both parent and student. Because again, we want to make sure you're getting this information and so you can plan accordingly, because this is a big deal. We know that we have a high college going rate. All of our students go to college in some capacity, but we also know these changes really do impact everybody. And so we want to make sure you're aware of that before you're making these decisions. We also want to minimize that stress and anxiety that students always have when applying to college. So just to kind of start, we're going to kind of go through what is the current college climate as it sits right now. So this first slide here. So essentially what the colleges are telling us, they're pretty much treating this year as what they call a laboratory moment. And that basically means, with this application cycle, they're really seeing since several students were unable to take the SAT or ACT prior to applying this school year, and colleges having to go test optional. So if students did end up having that test score, they were able to send it. But if not, basically colleges said, that's okay. We're not going to factor it as part of our admissions. So now colleges are having to see, did that really impact this class that they are going to be getting here this next year? So they are treating it kind of like a laboratory moment to see if standardized testing really does have an impact. Because in the past, colleges have always used that as an indicator of success in college. That was the one standardized thing where, grades can vary from school to school. Rigor can, vary from school to school. But one thing that was a constant that all students took was the same standardized test that they could look at. The other thing that's kind of happening, of course, during this time is this economic downturn. So there are several colleges that are actually for-profit colleges that are having to fold just because of the impact that this pandemic has had on them and their lower enrollment numbers, or else they're having to cut lots of programs and opportunities for students at their sites because of everything that's been happening. But it also means that some of those colleges that used to give a lot of need-based aid, financial aid, scholarships, they're also having to cut back, and they're primarily starting to look at applicants that actually can pay that full price because they just can't afford to keep what they're doing going. Some other big changes that we thought, and we were like, oh, wonder how this is going to turn out. A lot of our families that look to those selective schools thought, hey, maybe without standardized testing, those colleges that are normally very elite, selective, would be less selective. And unfortunately, that did not happen. Those elite colleges are still very selective. Their admission rates, if anything, it was kind of the reverse effect that they're seeing with this admission cycle. Specifically, the UCs, you might have read this in the paper not too long ago. The UCs actually had a 16.1% increase in their applicants, as well as the Ivy Leagues. Some of the Ivy League schools are toting that, they had a 30 to 60% increase in their applicants. So where we thought, oh, maybe this, a lot of families and students thought, well, maybe without those standardized tests, it leveled the playing field a little bit. They thought maybe there was a better chance for them because as we know, some kids, those tests are hard. Those students may not do well, but they perform very well in the classroom. I know certainly I was that student. I was a great student, but ask me about SAT and tests, any type of tests, and that was not my forte. Does it mean that student's less talented in any way? No. And certainly I had other things of good merit. But this is giving, obviously students thought they had a better opportunity to get into these colleges without those standardized test scores in the way. What we did see, though, was that even though we were seeing an increase in our students applying to the UCs and private schools, it's actually had a bigger impact on our lower income or socioeconomic disadvantaged students. And one of the things that you might have read recently is both the CSU and the community college took the biggest hit. Those schools primarily take in a lot of socioeconomic disadvantage. In fact, they really gear a lot of their programs to pull in those students and provide programming and things to assist them in that transition. But given the pandemic, many families they're seeing can't afford for their child to go to college. They weren't getting help and assistance since we are in an online situation to getting help filling out financial aid information, even college applications themselves. So our lower income students definitely have taken the biggest impact that they're seeing in the state, because they just are having to either go to a job instead of looking to go to college. And this was an interesting study that I read, that also showed that just even our seniors right now, 1 in 4 of them actually changed their plans, their post-secondary plans as they were applying to colleges. So although many thought, and I know Mrs. Fernandez and myself both saw this, students that said, oh, I'm going to apply to this school, this school, this school. Next thing we know, they're like, oh, I'm no longer applying to that college, or, oh, I'm no longer. So it definitely, this, pandemic has impacted students, not only their mental health, but also just the, really limiting themselves and seeing, maybe I don't want to go far away. I want to actually stay closer to home. It really did change the plans, as well as our seniors that graduated last year. We had a lot of students that decided not to go to college, even though they got into several colleges and were looking to go, but because of the online situation, their families decided that they would take a gap year. And so that is another thing that we saw, with this. Not only did we see that there was enrollment issues at most of the colleges this last year, but partially it was because several students were taking a gap year. Colleges saw a 300% increase in students taking a gap year, which ended up driving up early decision. So most selective colleges have an early decision where students can apply early in October, November time. And they end up getting early, decision back, usually December, knowing if they got into those colleges. In years past, students kind of had an advantage of applying early to some of the more selective schools, because colleges do tend to take a higher percentage of students during that early time. And so especially with this last year, we did see that a lot of the private schools were, fearful that they were going to have lower enrollment as they did this year. And so that actually drove up a lot of their early acceptance rates. So you can see that they put statistically that, it went up by 40% to 2/3 of those were already admitted in that early decision pool. And it's also good for the colleges, because you gotta remember, colleges are a business. And so they are, and we are the consumers, right? The students, parents, you guys are the consumers. And so they have to make sure that they are getting their numbers, in order to get that money to pay for all the programs and people behind those programs, the professors and so forth. So what that does is, by accepting students early on and ensuring that class, it also drives up their yield rates. So by giving that early acceptance, they're more likely to get that student to then commit to them and at sometimes pay, the full ticket price. So those are just some of the current climate changes that we're seeing between this year's admissions. Of course, we're still waiting for the next month or two to really see how our seniors this year fared. But this is what's been kind of going on among the colleges between last year and this year. So next up, there is some good that has also come from this, and Mrs. Fernandez is going to talk a little bit more about some of the positive changes that we've seen.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Bird. So, one of the most discussed changes due to COVID and the application process this year is the testing situation. So, due to that limited testing availability for both the SAT and the SAT, these colleges and universities across the United States were actually forced to suspend the requirement for the test scores as part of the admissions process. So, more than 400 colleges, including selective colleges, are not requiring the SAT or ACT for admissions this year. So instead, these colleges and universities adopted the test optional or test blind policy. And now some of these schools that implemented that 1 year test optional, test blind policy are extending that policy for the next year or two. And I know Mrs. Bird mentioned this earlier, but we get emails every day from different selective schools saying we're extending our testing policy for the year of 2022. Some have even said spring of 2023. So what does test optional mean? Test optional just means test optional. Schools are basically saying that if students have the scores, they're proud of it, then they can choose to submit those scores. It will not affect the admissions decision, and it can add value to the student's application. However, there is another term the colleges are using, which is the test blind. So test blind, on the other hand, means that even if students have test scores to submit, colleges will not use the test scores for the admissions process. So currently the CSU system has used this term and has suspended test scores for the admissions for class of 2021, which is of course our seniors, and class of 2022. We are thinking that they're going to move forward and actually go away from testing, at least for the CSUs and the UCs. That's what it's looking like. This UC system followed the CSUs. They are using the test optional, and they're moving into the test blind the next years. I know the UCs have sent out that communication. So like I mentioned, these state institutions are shying away from the test scores. We actually have a little resource. There are tons of lists out there in terms of how you can find what school has what type of policy, if they're extending that policy, until when. And so I'm going to put that in the chat really quick, and that way you could click on it. Again, there are other resources out there, but I know that as these institutions are updating their testing policy, a lot of these things are changing. And so we just wanted to make sure you guys had that resource. All right, so another thing another positive change that came this year was that announcement that College Board dropped the SAT subject test and the writing portion of the SAT. So with all the changes going on, College Board is making sure that their programs are adapting with them. So the pandemic actually accelerated a process that was already underway for the College Board. So again, the College Board is just trying to adapt to the COVID era and trying to simplify those demands on students and make that college admissions process more feasible. So that is something new, and you can actually find a little bit more about that if you want more detailed information. I could also post a link on the chat in a little bit. And then another positive outcome that came from this pandemic is the elimination of the application bloat, which just means curating one's resume of clubs, hobbies, extracurricular activities, as an appearance of substance rather than substance itself. Meaning these applications were just getting bigger and fatter. I mean, the more the students could add to it, the more they thought would be better for them. And so this pandemic has really shut down those activities that students used to use for that purpose of just filling up lines or checking off boxes. As the schools assess these students in this coming cycle, those admissions officers will be looking at your high school courses, the activities the students engaged in over these years, and instead they're not going to look at those just sign up clubs that students used to just use. So the big question here is, if there aren't any tests, what are those colleges looking at? So here we do have a couple factors and student activities engaged in over several years rather than sign up clubs, which I just mentioned a little while ago. We always tell our students, if you've been part of something, just stick with it. Colleges like to see consistency. So quality over quantity is something we always preach. It's not necessarily how many clubs and how many extracurricular activities you're part of, but instead which clubs or extracurricular activities you have been part of and for how long. Grades and academic promise. So grades do matter. Doing well in your classes over a period of time will show academic promise. So if you had a rough semester or a rough time in just a class, they like to see improvement. Say you got a B one semester, you got that A, those admissions officers like to see that. But overall, now more than ever, grades do matter. And actually, this is one of those main things on those colleges' agenda. It's at the very top. Academic rigor. So what classes are the students taking versus what classes are available to them? Are you challenging yourself? Are you doing the AP classes that are available? What other opportunities do you have on campus? So having a handful of AP classes and those college level classes show academic rigor. And our campus is rigorous. Our academics are rigorous. And again, I tell students this shows colleges that you can be successful with a rigorous course load, creativity and problem solving abilities. So during this pandemic, what choices did you make? Did you complete any volunteer work? Maybe you took the time off and didn't do any volunteer work. Maybe it affected you in a different way, and that's totally fine. But maybe you found a passion. And so I have a couple examples here. One of our students started a fundraising campaign to raise money to provide protective equipment for local hospitals. She ended up raising $36,000, which included cash donations, personal protective equipment, as well as having local restaurant owners deliver hot meals to the doctors and the nurses at one of our local hospitals. And so that was awesome. We also had another student go out and buy a sewing machine to make masks for a local hospital. He didn't know how to sew. He had no idea. He just went in, purchased that sewing machine, learned how to sew, created those masks, and then donated those to healthcare workers. And this was at the very beginning where masks were not very easily available. And so he did that. And again, these are just a few examples of the creativity and problem solving abilities that these students are using during this COVID era. And as we move forward, students need to start thinking of things they can do to align with their passions and their interests. And then just lastly, remember that students will be looked at in the context of the school and their experiences. So a lot of times we get the question, well, this school offers this many AP courses and things like that. So for example, there are 9 AP courses offered at our school, but 20 at another local high school. The admissions officer, the team, is not comparing the students with the other students at our local high school. Instead, they're looking at the school the student belongs to and comparing them to their peers. So your competition students are your peers, those around you, the ones hopefully you sit around class. Hopefully we could come back to in-person learning. So yes, they are comparing the students with those in our school, not others. And so with that said, another change COVID has brought to the college admissions process is how colleges approach their recruiting techniques during this era. And Mrs. Bird has a little bit more about that.
We're going to take a second because I think there are some questions and I unfortunately can't see those. So Mrs. Hickman, can you kind of moderate what those questions are?
Sure. And the first one, I was going to just send you the answer and then I hit the wrong button. So will this be available if someone can't come to watch it later? And yes, we are recording it. So we'll try to put this on our website. The second question is, are high school considered rigorous? And we should let our students answer that, but
yeah, we're pretty rigorous.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I would say definitely one of the most rigorous. We give an information meeting to potential 8th graders coming in, and we compare the senior year of a UHS student to the senior year of any local high school, and definitely our seniors take a full load, whereas at another high school they have English and government or econ and a bunch of electives. So definitely I would say we have a very rigorous high school. Okay, next question for counselors. Will colleges require the SAT and ACT next year? And this may have put in before you guys got to this question, but.
It just depends. Like right now for the CSU system, no. For the UC system, no. If they're using the test optional, it just means if you have them, you feel comfortable about that test score, you submit it, but if not, it's not going to affect that admissions process. I know I see here one that says, how can test scores not affect admission, but provide additive value? And so I know that is a big question, and I've seen it in tons of just interviews with the admissions officers. what I've seen out there is just basically they're not using them to admit you, but they can be used in your major specific. And so if you are in that STEM field or for English purposes, I know that they said if you have a test course and you have it, you could submit that, but it won't be added to that agenda that they're looking at when they're admitting students.
The other
And
thing with that added value is essentially if a student comes in that is similar to your student, that has similar grades, similar extracurriculars, but they maybe come in with test scores at a test optional school, that could give them an edge over a student that doesn't have those scores to look at. So that is something that a lot of the colleges say, it just adds value to their application. It gives them one other thing, one other piece to the puzzle that they're trying to put together as they're reading through these applications. So it could give a student, especially if they have a test score that they're very proud of, and it's maybe in the top percentile of the nation. In terms of the two tests, because we do get this question a lot, which test is better than the other, or which do they have to take both? And the answer is no. We encourage students to take both tests because we have a tendency to see some students do better in one test over the other, but they are equally accepted at all the colleges they apply to. So they don't care if you come in with an ACT, they don't care if you come in with an SAT. It's whichever test you do better in. I'll be honest, I see our UHS students doing a lot better on the ACT than we do the SAT. We've had more students get a perfect score on the ACT, and for a variety of reasons, mainly because ACT is more of a knowledge-based test. So it's testing them on all the academic standards that they've learned throughout their education. So yes, any other questions that Mrs. Hickman?
Yeah, we have
a lot popping in the chat now.
Yeah, so here's another one. Since the SATs are not being used by many schools, what are they using?
And we will get to that later in the presentation, just kind of what other pieces are, but what Mrs. Fernandez showed on this last slide, that truly is what they're looking at. These are, I'll go back to it, the pieces now that that colleges are now really starting to look at, because now they don't have the test scores in the way. So what are they going to pay attention to?
Okay.
Did I lose my screen? Are you guys?
no, we could still see it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, next question. Do you know if there are going to be any SAT/ATC testing dates for the spring semester?
They do have them, but they get canceled every time. And so that is the thing. It's been happening since last year where these tests were available and students would register, but then they would have to cancel them due to COVID guidelines, safety, and things like that. And so hopefully now with the vaccine, things getting a little bit more closer to normal, we will see the availability of from these exams or these tests available for our students. But at this moment they're there, you just can't register, or they get canceled if you do register. So
especially you got to imagine, can they really host, because they usually do these tests. We are not a test school, so we do not offer the tests at our school site. So students have to go to a gymnasium at a local high school, and can you imagine 300 students in a gym right now? That's probably not going to happen, even if they were, and it would be very limited to how many students they could actually take and proctoring. So there's just a lot of different pieces that have to be put in place in order to be safe for everybody that would come to these tests. So lots of protocols. And there's just no high school really in town equipped to do that yet, if they don't even have their full students body back on campus.
Okay, I'm trying to get through just the ACT questions. Let's see here. I'm getting conflicting answers on whether or not UC schools are test blind for fall 2022. Apple Ruth says they're test optional, but other sources say they're blind. Which should I refer to?
It is test blind for this year and next year. So like students, like Mrs. Fernandez said, if they still, like our juniors right now, were able to get a test score between now and when they apply, they could send that test score. But again, it won't be part of their admissions. That's the big part. It's not going to be part of their admissions at all. Like they cannot use it, but what they can use it for is, say, maybe they need to get out of an English class, or, you know, there's like placement tests that they do. So if they had that test score, some of their programs, their specialized programs may want to see that test score, but the admissions part itself for the UCs, they cannot use it as part of their admissions. That's why they say they're test blind. Now, after this next cycle, they're going to no SAT or ACT, like that's it. And they are supposedly adopting their own assessment, but that will not probably come out for, you know, a few more years. So
yeah, their goal is to have that test by 2025. And I will try to just link that information that's coming directly from the UC system on the chat, so you guys could just click on it. But that is basically what they're saying. They're not considering the SAT or ACT test scores when making admissions decision or awarding their scholarships. If you choose to submit test scores as part of your application, they may be used to determine your eligibility for the California statewide admissions guarantee as an alternative method of fulfilling minimum requirements. Just what Mrs. Bird just mentioned. So.
Okay, so this question, to what extent should we try to get the SAT, ACT go to another state? The answer,
no. Again, colleges are going to view you in the context of where you live. So they know that, you know, right now, California is in a world of hurt. And we have been unable to really get back to normalcy as other states have been able to. So they're really, they know that our students have not had the ability to test. And there's places in the applications that give students an opportunity to explain that if they needed to. But to be honest, colleges, that's why a lot of them are doing this test optional for at least the next year or so, because they know there's still no test dates available, especially for our juniors right now. So.
Okay. Will current freshmen probably have to take the SAT and ACT in the future?
It just depends. Like I said, this is a laboratory moment. So for many colleges, so we will have to see how these colleges really see it, if standardized testing really had an impact. But for sure, the public colleges in California, this isn't just because the inability to take the COVID test. In California specifically, it was basically because of a lawsuit against the UC saying that these tests are discriminating against those that have the means to get and hire private SAT and ACT tutors and test prep versus those that do have that opportunity. So that's why the public colleges in California are moving away and not going to be probably using this for sure, the UCs. The CSU, like we said, is kind of on the fence. But I think they'll follow suit if the UCs are doing it. They don't want to face any lawsuits either. So I'm sure they will follow suit with the UC in that. But yeah, so private schools, though, we will see what it looks like, and we will always keep you guys informed.
Okay, one last question about the SAT and ACT, and then we'll save these other questions for a little bit later. Does SAT versus ACT map more onto STEM or humanities?
Well, ACT, just so you know the differences, does have a science component, which is very different than the SAT. The SAT is really just testing you on English, reading, math. ACT has the science component. Their math is actually a little more challenging than the math on the SAT. The ACT does have usually questions of trig, which the SAT does not. The SAT has more, you know, algebra, geometry, those kinds of things, whereas the ACT does test you a little further in the math sequence. So, but again, like I said, the ACT is more standards-based, and our students tend to be pretty knowledgeable because the ACT actually really looks a lot like the state testing that our students receive every year for the most part throughout their education, whereas SAT is more evidence-based, research-based questions. So students really do have to practice to answer those questions, to really go through and do that test prep. So they're just two different tests. That's why we tell students, you just got to take more. I always have students, well, I'm SAT. And then they end up taking the ACT just to see, and they end up doing better, even though they took the SAT maybe 4 times, but they took the ACT once and got a better score than they did on the SAT. And there are some advantages. ACT does have an average system, so they average all those scores together. So if a student is more STEM, science, math, and they score really high, that can buffer out where they may get a lower score in another subject area. So again, they're just, yeah, it's good to take both if you're going to do it.
Okay, well, let's stop there with our questions and have you ladies move on, and we'll come back to questions in a little bit.
Sounds good. So moving on, we want to talk to you a little bit more. So, with all this being said, the other piece that also has changed quite a bit is how colleges are recruiting. When students usually take the PSAT, students click a button that says, I want to be part of your college search, which is where they are willing to receive information from colleges. So if your son or daughter already took the PSAT and they checked that box, their name and information was actually sold to colleges. So this is how College Board kind of makes its money. And colleges would then start sending you stuff in the mail. And maybe some of you have received quite a bit of mail based on essentially what, your name being, or your son or daughter's name being sold to these colleges. But so a lot of colleges did base a lot of their sales pitch on those fancy brochures and view books that they would send out. And given that, they would always talk about the culture of their school and try to get you onto campus so you could really see, what campus is like, that they have the best food, the best dorms with the view of the beach, that was their biggest sales pitch. But being that the colleges all had to shut down, that really had to change the way they were reaching out to students, and that a lot of students didn't get to take the PSAT. So again, that also impacted their ability to get student information. So some of the things that the colleges have done this year specifically is really step up. So they have been offering Zoom sessions, online college fairs. They even track students as they go and cruise around on their website. They will go look for, like, if a student should go on a college's website, they actually ping them and instantly will maybe even pop up, would you like to chat with an admissions officer? Are you interested in this school? Type your email address and we'll send you more information. So they are actually tracking students as they're even on the websites, even what programs they may have been looking at, because that's how they're able to then connect with these students and try to give more information and do more of that email soliciting. Social media has obviously helped. I think the other day, I know all the students that may be on this call probably watched, there was a movie that's on Netflix, and it has the girl that goes to NYU, and now NYU. In fact, in one of my conferences the other day, a student said, I think I want to go to NYU because I watched this show and she went to NYU and she fell in love. And so colleges know what they're doing. They know how to reach out and especially tap into these students, with a lot of that social media and Instagram and all of those ways to connect, especially with our students now that are so technology savvy. They're offering a lot of virtual campus tours. So literally you can go to any college website and you can click on, they probably have a virtual campus tour. So you can get a bird's eye view of what that campus may look like. So this has really increased their visibility more than ever before, even though they may not get as many students coming onto campus right now. They're still able to reach out to all these students. But leading to that, what ends up happening is a lot of those elite schools still are always the big push. Many of our students, what we call it's a college GPS. So all of our students really are only aware of certain colleges. It's like everybody buys the same college map. And which schools, it's usually these top 10 that I'm going to show you. And it's been the same. You will see, it's kind of enlightening to watch this little video real quick, just to see how these schools since 1982 have been in this top 10. And so just kind of want to show you this little video here. Oop, hopefully. All right. So very telling, right? Just that those schools tend to stay since 1982 in those things. And as you can see, like the dips and some go up, you know, it could be something as simple as, you know, their basketball team won, you know, the national championships. It could be something like that, or, you know, March Madness, you know, they were in the, you know, it's their advertising. Again, colleges run like a business. These colleges are not hurting for applicants. In fact, we have some data that we do want to show you. But sadly, what I put here is true. You know, these rankings are based on, it's not based on how many students they actually accept, it's how many they actually turn away. That's why these rankings are the way they are. So again, it's giving you perspective. We're not saying don't apply to these schools, but we also want you just to be aware there's a lot more colleges out there than just these 10 colleges. Certainly we've had students from UHS get into these, you know, colleges, but is that maybe necessary that that's the best college for our students? And we want to make sure that you're making the right choices. And so, oops, we already watched the video. Let's go out. You know, every college going with that kind of has its own college agenda. So this is also something really important that you know, that every year, basically before the admission cycle starts, colleges have an agenda. They know what they're looking for. They tell their admissions people that are going to be reviewing the applications what their needs are. So it's kind of like the NFL draft, right? When they go to do it, and I know Mrs. Hickman can relate because she's a big football fan. When they're going to do the NFL draft, every coach knows what they need. I need a linebacker. I need that quarterback. You know, they kind of know their needs. So it's the same thing with colleges. When they see, you know, they know going in what they're looking for. It may be demographics. They may be looking, in fact, there's actually a lot of statistics that support that males are in the need at these colleges. So oftentimes selective schools are looking for more males to balance out the female to male ratios at a lot of the colleges. It could be geography. You know, a lot of times California students are recruited the most just because they're more likely to leave the state. Our students are, you know, our families in California are used to traveling lots of miles to get from one place to another. So leaving the state, you know, they're ready to do that because to get anywhere, it takes a lot to travel, and our students are ready to go. In fact, the average for how far a Californian student will go for college is 500 miles. So that's the average. Whereas across the nation, most students, the average is just 100 miles away from home is where they will go to college. So you can see the big difference there, that why there are probably more admissions officers scheduled to meet with California students than any other state because they want our students. Legacy or faculty children of that college. Some, you know, legacy does still carry some weight in some of these big selective schools, as well as if they have faculty children coming through. Instrumental needs, it could be something like we need an oboe player for our music program, or we need a goalie for the soccer team. It could be building a major program. They're looking to build their humanities program, you know, and trying to grow their numbers because it seems to be that they're getting more students that are more STEM. So they're trying to to grow their humanities program. So again, colleges always have their agenda. And another thing that we did see this year in terms of what the colleges have been doing is also accepting more students from schools that they know. Because that overall enrollment was down a lot for a lot of the colleges going into this admission cycle, they stuck to admitting students that they know were coming from high schools where they were successful already at their college. So they do try to build relationships with those high schools and know the caliber of students that they are receiving. So again, it's just kind of what, it looks like. When it comes to colleges. The other big thing that we saw is this whole online education. And like I mentioned before, obviously we can do this online education. Our students have been proving it every day, but that's really shift the focus to, okay, let's take out the glitz and glamour. And what is this really about? It's about making sure our students get an education and that they're able to contribute to our economy when they get done with that education. And that may not need to be at a college that's far away from home. In fact, there's a lot of indications that, going away for college, a lot because of the pandemic is going to kind of diminish, that students may feel, I've heard it a lot from some of my families that I've been talking to, that some of their students don't even want to leave the house now. It's really kind of made them, see how much family is important. A lot of our students have lost a lot of loved ones through all of this pandemic. So it may diminish some of that wanting to go away. And online courses have become more of the future. So there is a way to still, supplement. A lot of these colleges are trying now to grow some of their student populations by having more of online programs. So that's just some of the things that we see that the colleges are shifting. But next up, let's talk about some of the popular beliefs in college admissions. So Mrs. Fernandez.
All right. So there is a popular belief that tends to equate merit with achievement. So in reality, these colleges see achievement as a fixed event. So that 3-hour SAT or ACT exam, whereas merit is something done over time, such as the grades you receive over the 4 years in high school. There is another belief that grades and test scores alone determine the college acceptance, but the reality is that by using only these two measures, there are simply many more qualified applicants than there are spots in any selective school. So let me give you an example. Think about this. Out of the 26,000 applicants for admissions to a recent class at Harvard, 8,200 had a perfect GPA. Out of those, 3,500 had a perfect SAT math score and 2,700 had a perfect English score. But Harvard had only about 1,700 spots to offer. So who gets in? And that is that question. Who gets in? So this is why we encourage our students to participate in activities that align with their interests and their passions, because test scores and grades are not the only factors in that admissions decision. And they are looking at other things when they're admitting their student. Another popular belief that goes around this topic is that don't believe the sticker price, but actually, you should believe that sticker price for many of these colleges, because in reality, the sticker price sometimes is really what you will be paying for that school. Colleges use the merit aid bait or the merit aid as bait to lure some of these accepted students to think they will receive a very good scholarship because of their grades and their test scores. But in reality, I know that I've been, that book that we will mention at the very end does talk about how some of these institutions offer that scholarship for all students, even the ones who could afford it. And it's not necessarily just merit aid, it's given to other students as well. So an example we have, a student who went off to University of San Francisco, she actually received a scholarship, but she was still going to incur a $20,000 debt each year. So by the time she was done with her 4-year program, she was going to be $80,000 in debt. So imagine that she got a good scholarship, but at the time she graduated, she's going to have that $80,000 in debt. So when it comes to cost, merit and achievement isn't necessarily going to give students a scholarship. And students and families should be prepared for what these schools will actually cost, especially now because of COVID. And I know we mentioned this earlier, a lot of them will be looking for students or families who can't afford the sticker price and pay the full price. The next point here says elite colleges promote that they seek the racial and socioeconomic diversity, but largely still enroll students in top 10% of the American income. So as much as they say they are doing this, their data is not supporting it. So we encourage our parents and our students to have these family discussions about the cost of college, the income, how much in reality the family can afford before applying. Parents need to be very transparent with their student about what they can afford. And that way, when students are making those college lists, they're making smart choices when they're selecting these schools and when they're actually applying. So looking ahead, what does this all mean when you are applying to college?
Okay, so applying to college. So some of the things, and these are what we're seeing is going to be sort of the looking ahead, basically our guidance and advice that we have for students and parents. One thing I think for sure is going to happen is that we hope to change that students and parents start to be a little more practical about their college options versus less emotional. So really going, oh, I have to get into this school. It's an Ivy League and I have to, if I don't get in there, that's it. My college dreams and hopes are over. And so really making it more of a practical decision, what works for our family, what's the best for us. And applying for the experience rather than that brand. So again, moving away from the prestige and really applying for that experience. And how do you get that experience? You got to talk to others that have walked that experience, because honestly, you can't really understand. It's like going out and buying a car, right? You wouldn't just go buy a car without maybe test driving it, making sure, like reading the reviews. Okay, it's the same thing here. How are you going to really know if this college is a good fit if you haven't really experienced it or have anything to measure it against? So it's important to talk to people, alumni. We have a strong alumni network with our students that we can, obviously connect with those students to give that support if students are applying to these schools, and making sure that it is a right fit. Do they think that that is an experience that they would want to go through? And that's where we want those conversations to happen. Start asking people, where did you go to college? What was the experience like? And someone who's been maybe there for, and graduate within the last, decade, so that way they have something kind of current. There is no magic formula. We get this question all the time. How do we get our kids into these great colleges? And there really is no magic formula. Like I said, colleges have their own agendas. So we really just want students to focus on being that best version of themselves, doing things they love, that they're passionate about, and that will shine through on any application. And honestly, I always think that where they're meant to be is where they're meant to be. And even, we always associate, well, certain majors will get them certain jobs. They actually say that if you're an English major, you actually looking long term, they end up having the best financial situation for themselves in the future. So who thought an English major? But hey, so anyways, it's so important that you understand that there really is, we can't tell you what if you do this and this, you're going to get into Stanford. If you do this and this, all we can say is just trying to be, students try to find, that one thing about them that's different than everybody else. Don't try to be like everybody else. AP exams, this is something that's come up too in regards to testing. They may become more prominent because with the removal of SAT and ACT, these are going to be the next standardized test scores that colleges really have to look at. So, there's a lot of talk that AP exams will become more important and that students can show that subject strength that they could have shown on an SAT or ACT, they'll be able to show them through the different APs they take. So students, when they're picking picking their APs to take, be very focused on the ones and pass those that they take, because that could be that new standardized test. And again, moving away from, as you're really starting to look at colleges, that it does become more of an academic, social, and financial measure versus the geography part. And what I mean by that is just moving away of where this college is, but really looking at all these three other pieces. Do I fit, into this bubble that this college has? So these are kind of our advice or best practices. Students really should focus on getting the best grades they can. And I know our school is tough. Trust me, I get it. And that's something that students are working at. But I will say this, if you get a B, it's okay. I can't tell you how many times I've had students come into my office and say, Miss Bird, I got a B. That's it. My college dreams are over. Oh my gosh, no. But if they can see that that progression is there, your improvement, okay, and that you're still, even though you got that B, there may be something else that was taking up that time that you were doing. So you were showing other interests and passions that you may have, even though like sometimes grades, they happen, but we want you just to focus on that. And that's nice that maybe standardized testing is going away so students can just focus on their grades. One less test to take. That's what I always say. College list should be about your needs, and fuss with names later on. So it really should be about your needs. And maybe that's location. Maybe it's the opportunities that that college may have, like internships. Students forget Fresno State is a primarily, sorry, I can't say it, an undergraduate institution. So that means that students in their undergrad get a lot of those research opportunities. We've had many students that carried on to Fresno State their freshman year are getting research opportunities right here at Fresno State. And that's from the get-go. Where at other colleges, sometimes it's like a needle in a haystack. They're competing with thousands of other students for one research opportunity, or they have to work really hard because they're competing with graduate students that are getting those opportunities. So those are the things you want to look for as you're creating these lists, and making sure that on that list you have what they call safety schools, schools where you have a GPA that falls within sort of the admitted GPA parameters that they like to give. Or you look at their acceptance rate, and it's definitely a higher acceptance rate that you're seeing than in other colleges. And keep that college list in the single digits. We always say this, don't apply to more than 9 colleges. And the reason for that is there has been a big market to apply to all these schools. What's one more college? Apply. And that's not necessary. After students, kind of get through that college search process and they really start, if they are applying to way too many schools, that means they're not going to focus on each of those schools. They will spread themselves. They start piecemealing essays together and saying, well, I did this essay for this college, I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in for this college, and they just start to spread themselves too thin. So we really want those college lists to stay in the single digits. That's our best advice. So they can really focus on delivering the best application they can for each of those schools. And you got to create a financial budget. And that's for applying too. Applying to college is expensive. I know when I applied to Fresno State, I just walked up, I paid no fee. They signed me a little form and I was in. There was no fee, nothing. Now, college application fees are $70 to $100 a piece. So you imagine if you're applying to 9 schools, multiply that by $70. Okay, that's a lot of money. It's over $500 just to apply to college. And that's not the only expense. You also have to send usually test scores, transcripts, and other documents, financial documents that come at a price. So you definitely want to create a budget and say, look, this is how much we have for you, to apply to college. And ultimately, you got to do what's affordable. The average median price for a public college is $21,000 a year. So if you can't write a check right now for $21,000, then maybe you got to figure out some other ways unless you can financially support that for 4 years. The average median price for private schools is $49,000. So again, if you can't write a check today for $49,000 for over a course of 4 years, okay, that's really impactful. That's a lot of debt to incur unless you're really able to secure these merit-based or some type of financial aid and other scholarship money. So you got to make sure that you're doing your homework and seeing what's affordable for your family. We've had too many students get into some really great schools, but realize they didn't have the money, they'd have to sell their house for their child to go to that school. And here that kid was banking on that college, and now their dreams are crushed because ultimately he didn't want to see his parents lose their house for him to go to college. And the aftermath of having a large debt is not very good. Like, it's just, it creates more hardship in the end for everybody. So we want to make sure that you're just making those choices. And then on a final note, Mrs. Fernandez, final destination.
Yes. And just finally, we just want our families to know that there will be changes in the future of the college admissions. We have discussed only a few of the things we are seeing right now, but COVID has really shaken things up for everyone, not just the admissions process. And so I know Mrs. Bird and I try to keep up to date, and any new information that comes our way, we try to share that information with you guys. So please just know that we don't have answers for everything, because just we say one thing today, the next thing one of the colleges is posting something different, and so you have to be flexible. And I know that I've read that a lot lately, just looking at this information. These colleges are also very flexible, and so again, we will just keep you updated as we get this information. Another thing to keep in mind is that the work students are doing here at UHS will prepare them to be successful in college. We understand that we are very rigorous, we're very fast paced. Our students work hard, but it does pay off. Many of our past students actually share with us that when they go off to college, college is easy because they went through the UHS curriculum. They feel prepared. And recently we did survey some alumni. We surveyed 315 students from different graduating classes, and about 80% of them said they graduated in 4 years or less, which is a great number, because the national college 4-year graduation rate is about 46%. And so usually when students are doing the college search, that number, the graduation rate that you see, is actually for 6 years, not 4 years, because these colleges don't want to present the 4-year graduation rate. We also know that a guaranteed way to cut the cost of the undergraduate degree is to graduate within the 4 years, but the majority of students do not manage to graduate in 4 years. So again, at UHS, you're taking these AP classes, you're taking these college level classes. A lot of our students, depending on the major that you go in, you can get in and get out within 3 years, and then transfer to grad school, or do your prereqs, and then do the 4 years that you need to do, and then go into your grad program. So again, I know it is very difficult. We understand, but we promise it does pay off at the end. And then just finally, we want students and their families to know whether they're in the beginning, middle, or near the end of the college search, to treat the college search as a journey of self-discovery, where the journey is more important than the destination. So constantly remind yourself that while you can steer this process, you can't control that ultimate outcome, because again, remember, the colleges have that agenda. So with that, I know Mrs. Bird is going to give you that resource that we based our presentation on, and then we'll open it up to questions.
So this is a book that myself and Mrs. Fernandez have been reading. We like to obviously keep ourselves up to speed with information. And basically this guy, Jeffrey Salingo, he went into like admissions, 3 admissions offices. It was University of Washington, Emory, and I can't remember, Davidson, I think, were the 3 colleges that let him in to watch the admission cycle. So he actually got to be in the room as they were deciding the fate of their applicants. And it's just very interesting. He also talks just more about like that whole, like, colleges are a business, and that they are the buyers and the sellers, and basically we're the students and the parents are the consumers. So this is a website that you can go to get more information. And again, the book is on Amazon, it's on audio. So it's definitely something that where a lot of this information that we gathered, which was very enlightening and just very telling of college admissions. So we recommend that as a great source. Okay, hopefully. So we can open it up now to questions. If Mrs. Hickman would like to moderate that.
I will. Mrs. Fernandez, when you put those link in, it's going to just the panelists. If you could put it to panelists and attendees.
Thank you.
Okay, so some of these questions may be reverting back to earlier slides, but that's okay. So the first question is, no question, UHS is rigorous. How much of this is known to colleges across California, across the country? Do the admissions people know UHS?
So I would say we are definitely on their radar. This is something that if you ever came to our information sessions, Dr. Bushman, prior to Mrs. Hickman, would always put me on the spot because colleges were actually inviting me to go visit their campuses. So, it's not only that the colleges are soliciting students, but they're also soliciting us. And they want us to be sure that we are giving information to our students. So definitely we are on the radar. When I have visited these colleges, they know exactly who we are. And especially as we have students that graduate and go to these colleges, then we definitely get put on the radar. I definitely feel that UC Berkeley, one of the reasons why they are one of the, I would say of all the UCs, except most of our students, is because they actually are familiar with our school. I think that they know the caliber of students. Like I said, colleges do like to pull from those places that they've admitted before. I think that UC Berkeley has recognized the rigor and what our students are doing here in the music background, and they like that. And so I think that's why out of all the UCs, they accept more of our students than any other UC. And we see that year after year. So I do feel like we are on the radar of, obviously the colleges in California, but those ratings that we get through Niche and, through US News and World Report, they definitely put us on the radar of many colleges. And something that you may not know is when students do apply to these colleges, we send a profile. So even in the UCs this year, we were allowed to send our school profile. And if you wanted to see what's on that school profile, it's actually on our UHS counseling page at the bottom. You can click on it and it actually shows everything that our school is about, from our 48 book program to the courses that we offer, the fact that we have limited extracurricular activities, because let's be honest, we're a small school, so we can't offer everything. And that, they really get to see everything that we do here, which really does benefit our students. And when they see that profile, we are unlike any other school. There's not very many, there's lots of high schools doing dual enrollment, but we are one of the few that's actually on a 4-year university campus. That makes us very unique because there's not a lot of 4-year colleges that are doing that. In fact, I think there may only be San Diego, UC San Diego may have a high school on its campus, but they're the only other one, I think, in the state. So we're very recognized, if that helps.
Yes, a great answer on that. And then there's a question that's in the chat. And if everyone could put your questions in the Q&A, that'd be really helpful. I'm trying to answer this or read this question in the chat here. It says, to what degree undergraduate program influences graduate program acceptance? And whether to what degree graduate program versus undergraduate program influences future earnings?
Okay. Well, obviously, if you are, it depends, right? Because it depends on where you're going for graduate school. If the plan is to go to medical school, then it doesn't matter where you go to get that undergraduate degree. It depends on how well you do at that institution and the opportunities that you have had. And we've learned that a lot through different conversations we've had with Dr. Riley, who is the pre-med advisor here on Fresno State's campus. In fact, Fresno State has the same national average of those students getting into med school than any other institution. again. So that, depending on what your plans are for the future, sometimes what you do in that undergrad, it's really just about that. It's how well you do at that particular college. I will say that most jobs now require that graduate degree. At least a good portion of them do want that graduate degree. So if you're looking at overall incomes, yeah, the higher you go in your education, probably going to end up with more income. I mean, it's not an obsolete, but it's definitely a known fact that if you pull up any, depending on your education, what the average income is, it's usually the higher you are in that education, the more your income will be. So I hope that kind of answers, but definitely, our students, when we were polling, when we did our alumni survey, we have a lot of students that are getting their PhDs, they're in graduate school, they're doing all kinds of amazing things. They're professors, professional degrees, and it was amazing to see that. So I hope that answers it.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
because it just varies.
Yeah.
It's really hard to.
Okay, staying along the lines of Fresno State here, if we stay at Fresno State, do UHS students get reserved seating?
No, you don't get reserved seating. You might get some free parking though. So, which is pretty good when you obviously are coming to park to go to class. As part of our 3-year guarantee program that we do have with Fresno State for some majors, students are, they can get a book voucher or a parking pass. They can get priority registration for their classes. But seating, in all colleges, it's kind of a first come, first serve. You better get there early to class and then you get your seating. But that priority registration does go a long way, because here at Fresno State, the only students that really get priority are the honors college students, athletes, and that's about it. So, to get priority registration as part of this program that's what's going to guarantee you getting those classes, the ones you need.
Yeah, and maybe just tell a little bit about the program. I think you have to take 15 units every semester.
Yeah.
It starts this second semester at Fresno State, correct?
Yeah, so you do have to prove that it doesn't happen right away that you're in this program. You have to sign a pledge that you want to be part of this Promise program. And again, not all majors apply to this because they can't guarantee that for some majors, especially those in the sciences, just because there's so many classes that build on it, like a bio, and then you have to take this bio and then this chemistry, and so many science classes. But for most of the other majors, and there's a full listing on Fresno State's website of which majors do apply to the California Promise program. But yeah, you have to be in good standing and then you start to get those benefits. So usually after the first year or first semester at Fresno State, our students start to take advantage of these different perks that we have, this special agreement with Fresno State.
Okay, next question about Fresno State. If more students plan to remain in Fresno, will Fresno State be harder to enroll, or will they limit their enrollment?
So, and again, that was interesting this year, is that the Cal States are actually down in enrollment. So actually students can still apply to some of the Cal States because they're so down in enrollment. So we don't know if, without standardized tests, what their new indicators, but as far as my understanding is, as long as they met the A to G requirements this year, pretty much because you're Fresno, you will get priority to Fresno State. Everybody was accepted as long as you met the A to G requirements. So we will see what the new index score is, and I think this is important to note that UHS students, it's not just because we're on campus that we just automatically get admitted to Fresno State. Students still have to apply. But because we are, Fresno, we're local, our students get priority over anybody else outside of the area. So anybody who's applying from, say, Los Angeles, trying to get into Fresno State, our local students would have a better chance of getting in. So it's going to be based on GPA, because if they have no test scores, it used to be test scores plus GPA. So without that now, it's just going to be GPA. But as long as a student maintains their grades and meets those A to G requirements, which are the requirements to go direct to a Cal State and a UC, which we go over in your individual conferences, you should have no problem getting into Fresno State. Outside Cal States, that could change because now you're no longer getting that priority.
Okay, these two questions kind of go together. At what grade level do you expect students to begin independently researching colleges? And then also this question says, I sometimes get emails from random colleges that ask me to tour their college and to see what their college is about. However, I'm confused on why they do this because I'm only a freshman. Is this a good sign, or do they send stuff like this to everybody or to people?
Do you want to take one, Rosia?
Yeah, so these colleges, again, they are recruiting students. And so they are going to be reaching out to you. A lot of times, like Mrs. Bird mentioned, College Board does sell your information when you do take that PSAT. And so that's how they start recruiting. And so we do encourage students, though, to check out some of these schools that are reaching out to them. If they have interest in you, a lot of times they give you a code to apply to their institution and you get to apply for free. A lot of times we just encourage you to explore the campus so you get to know a little bit more about some of these institutions. In terms of, what was the other question? Say,
Oh, is it the Fresno State one?
yeah. There was two questions, right?
It was pretty much similar question about what grade level should you start researching colleges.
So we tell our students that sophomore year, our focus is the career search piece. And so our sophomore year, we focus on those assessments, finding interest with careers and things like that. Our junior year, that's when we focus more on the college search piece. That's when we start telling students you need to add colleges to your list. We also basically have them have an internal deadline of October 1st. That's when we want them to have a solid list of colleges they're going to apply. But honestly, students could start searching for colleges at any time, especially they have access to Naviance. And so with that program, they could go in and find a match in terms of what they're looking for a college. We go in and do those assessments with them. But if they go in and start exploring colleges, that's totally fine. They will not break that program, and we could always go in and reset some of those assessments. So we encourage students to start looking whenever they have the time. Usually during the summer, when we meet with them during our conferences, we say, hey, in the summer, if you have time, this is your checklist and this is what you should be doing. So again, we walk our students through that process in our one-on-one meetings. And so we'll guide you through that. I know this year it was pretty awesome. We created our Google Classroom. And so students have access to a lot of the resources. We would just hand them in person. We would hand them a folder full of just documents, but now they have these documents in a Google Classroom and they have access to a lot of these resources online as well.
Okay, couple quick questions here. Are there plans to reduce the number of community service hours for juniors and seniors, even with all the ideas you shared? Safety issues are, prevalent.
Right. Yeah, our graduation requirement did not change. It's still 80 hours of community service, but we did post on our UHS website on the counseling page. If you click on, there's a little icon that says community service. We did put together a list of, different opportunities during the pandemic because some things are not available. So there was lots of ideas of what students can do during this time if they can't get into different places for volunteering. But to be honest, we are being very flexible with what counts as volunteering. I've had some students that are literally having to help at home, their siblings that are at home and, babysitting them because their parents are at work, helping them academically. I'm letting them count those hours as tutoring. And so, anything that's volunteer, you're not getting paid for it. I mean, even as much as just going out in the neighborhood and picking up trash, those kinds of things, as long as, a parent could just verify that, yes, these hours did happen, we're counting those. We're not being very like, oh, it has to be through an organization or, oh, you have to do, it has parameters. No, but for college purposes, they like to see volunteer work. They like to see that you're doing things within your community and it's on your own accord. It's not someone saying, well, you got to get volunteer work. No, it's more of, we just happen to put that we want our students to be required because we want to make sure that we are setting that precedence but we really want students to find other ways to really reach out in the community, because it looks better for them in a way that they can even tap into maybe a career interest or something that they're doing at that community service that helps them figure out what they want to do later on. So it gives them that exposure too, depending on what they're doing. So work experience, same thing, you know, as community service, they really do treat those as opportunities that students have had that gave them a chance to give back in some capacity to the community. So.
Okay, what about, so with dorms, is there any changes with colleges that require students their freshman year to stay in the dorms? Like, are they getting away from the requirement dorm to stay? You know, they have to stay in the dorms.
Yeah, you know, and it was interesting just to see some of our students that were going to college, you know, they basically are now just kind of letting them back. They made them basically be single occupancy, those students that were coming to campus, you know, so it's definitely going to be interesting how they do it. We haven't really heard yet, since still a lot of these schools were just barely getting a lot of these students back to campus. But as far as what I'm hearing is, you know, a lot of the colleges for dorm purposes are making it single occupancy. So they really had to, you know, so I'm sure they lifted a little bit of having to live on campus, so that way they could spread everybody out, and just those that had to live on campus are living on campus, but those that could maybe live somewhere else or off campus. But, you know, again, this is what colleges really pride themselves on, is especially those residential campuses where they really try to get students to live all on that campus all 4 years. But I'm sure they are taking just as many measures because there was a lot, if you remember, I would say earlier on in COVID, where they didn't really shut down, and then they were, you know, schools were having to close down because they were letting students still on campus, and then COVID outbreaks, and they were still having social get-togethers. And, you know, so, but yeah, so nobody has said specifically like they're lifting any of that. I just think they're kind of doing different things with their students.
Okay, what about, what advice or information do you have for students that are low income and can't afford college, but they really want to go?
I could answer that one. So for those low income students, there's tons of programs. And your counselor, Mrs. Bird, or I would definitely work with you. So you just need to let us know, especially in those one-on-one conferences. There are opportunities for students. I had a student this year who applied to Stanford, and he's a low income student. And so sometimes it's not just being low income, it's the activities you're doing and things like that, but there are definitely just opportunities out there. And so I would say just work with us, and we will give you access to those opportunities, because again, there's like Questbridge, there's for the CSU system, there is what is that, Summer Bridge,
EOP, Equal Opportunity Program.
So there's Puente. And so there's just tons of resources out there, and you just need to work with us, and we could work out a plan with you and just give you access to those resources.
And that's something that would be great if we know ahead of time, you know, because oftentimes we don't know about that until we receive a request saying that, oh, this student is low income, they're requesting this letter of rec to be part of our program. And we're like, wait, the student never really told us that they had an income issue or that they were low income. So it's really important that not only families, that you guys are discussing these things with your student, but also with us. So that way, when we see an opportunity or a program, we're aware that, hey, we can connect you with this person, this program. That's why we pride ourselves on building these relationships. And if you can be transparent with us, we will give you the world. You just got to let us know what you need, and we will get it for you.
And then I was going to mention about that student. So last year I had a student who she applied through a program, and she was a low income student, and she applied to UCLA, one of the toughest UCs on that list, and she got in. And so again, there are opportunities. She didn't get a full ride scholarship, but there were other financial opportunities for her. And so, like Mrs. Bird said, you just need to work with us, let us know, and be transparent, and we will definitely help you any way we can.
Okay, a few more questions here. Say we go to UHS, but we don't live in Fresno County. Does this still apply? And I think that had to do with the question about Fresno
Fresno State.
being
Yeah,
Fresno.
no, it extends. I mean, if you're in, the area, so and the area extends pretty far beyond Fresno County. So because it's within the radius of our Cal State, so basically we are bordered up against Bakersfield. So if you're closer to us than you are Bakersfield, you should be good. And then it's kind of bordered up between us and Stanislaus, which is a little bit more up north, about like an hour and a half away, I would say. So, it's definitely extends around this county and the close counties that are also around, like Kings County, Tulare County. So it definitely is, it's as long as we're not as far as, like I said, Bakersfield or Stanislaus, we basically get this whole area, Fresno. And they may actually note that on their website. I'm not sure the county, what's considered, local area context. But everybody that's at least within an hour radius, I'm pretty sure you're safe. So I don't think we have anybody that's further beyond that. So.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase this question a little bit. If we take some GE classes at community college during the summer, and we're a computer science major, do you think we could finish in 3 years?
Yeah, and I think computer science was also on, I think it's part of the California Promise. I don't think that one is not excluded major. So I think so. Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, I'm just going to disclose, I had a student who was a psych major at Fresno State and graduated in 1 year doing community college between the summer, when she graduated. She took a couple extra college classes because there was opportunity her senior year to take a few extra Fresno State, did that summer, counted through her courses that year and graduated. I couldn't believe it. So psych major. Yeah. So 1 year. So it can be done. Can be done if you do the community college and take those extra classes and opportunities, and you take quite a few units per semester. Yeah, you could definitely get it done.
So this year for 2021, computer science was added to the list. It is an excluded major.
Bummer. Okay. So
yeah, but I will link the Fresno State California Promise on the chat, and so students and parents could actually go in there and also look at what other programs are excluded.
Okay, great.
Okay, it's weird on this webinar format. It tells us that somebody raised their hand, but we don't know who it is. I want to say it was Sophia. Sophia, I'm gonna give you permission to talk here. So let us know if you have a question.
Oh, she just jumped on.
Sophia, do you have a question?
Maybe not.
Okay, maybe not. Okay, I'm gonna remove her back. Hopefully I don't kick you off here, Sophia. Oh gosh, then you can't remove here. Yikes. Okay, I'm gonna.
All right, she can present with us, in case she wants to.
Okay, you went back to attendee land. Okay, sorry about that. It tells us that somebody raised their hand, but we don't know who it is. So sorry about that. Okay, we're gonna keep going here. A few more questions. The California Promise is for what schools? So just explain that again briefly.
So it's actually a Cal State program. So it's not just Fresno State. It's basically, the Cal States are trying to improve their 4-year graduation rates. So what they do is they identify students on their campus that look to be fitted for completing their degree in 4 years. So normally they send an invitation to them. In fact, on the application, there is a button that says, would you like to be considered for the California Promise program on all the Cal State applications? And so when a student hits that, then they're notified that if your major, fits within, you know, what we think you can graduate in 4 years with, and we can guarantee you that graduation, will you pledge and be willing to do whatever we ask? And so there are some requirements, but again, you know, then they get, you know, this guaranteed to graduate in 4 years, and they really guide them. They have an advisor that is in charge of them to help make sure that they're getting their classes. They have to take a certain amount of units per semester in order to do that. With our students, though, when this whole program started, we kind of wheeled and dealed with Fresno State and just said, hey, because our students already have all these Fresno State college units and AP, you know, they already have about a year, if not more, of college already knocked out. So instead of selling the whole 4-year program, can we sell it as a 3-year program? And we got approval to do so. And then they added these special benefits to our students to get not only that advising, but the priority registration, as well as a book voucher or free parking. But again, it's based on majors. So those majors, I would look to see what is listed on there if they're looking at that. So, but it's a great opportunity. It is a little different though than SMIC camp. So if a student were to get SMIC camp, they can't really participate in the California Promise program because SMIC camp is the honors college program at Fresno State, which is a tuition and board scholarship all 4 years. And then students are in those honors program classes. So they can't, you know, they have to kind of follow their program and not the California Promise program.
And I also linked the California Promise from the CSU system for reference.
Great. Here's a question. What message would you give each grade level? So each grade level class 2025, 24, 23, 22, as we are nearing the end of the pandemic and beginning their college search process?
One thing I've been telling on all my sophomore conferences is just focus on your grades for the rest of the semester. Don't worry about anything else. Just keep, because this whole online thing has been a challenge for us mentally, academically, the whole 9 yards. So I just really want students to focus on, getting the best grades they can for the rest of the semester. And then next year, hopefully we're back on campus, and then that'll be the time to really think about what activities do I want to devote my time to. So I'm still going to have my academics as my number one focus, but what now activities and interests can I get myself involved in? And then if, the college process, we're actually doing a lot in the classrooms with the students. So we get that students are busy and they don't have sometimes the time that they need to really do this college research. So luckily at UHS, we have teachers that are willing, especially Mr. Bensley, who's our junior and senior year PE teacher. He lets us come in the classroom every month with our juniors to do different pieces of the college search, career exploration. With the sophomores, we just finished doing our career exploration. So we can definitely, we're doing a lot of that with them already in the classrooms. But on the side, students should really just start paying attention to things, asking people, especially as talking to family members that have gone to different colleges or doing different careers. How did you get there? It's those questions that I think that need to come, and then the pieces will come together as we do this career and college research with them in the classroom. So that's kind of my advice. And come senior year, we hope that by then they've got a pretty good idea of which colleges they want to apply to, what they're kind of looking to do in the future to help pick that major that they're going to go for. So we hope that we've made this process easier, but they do have to think about it. We have too many students sometimes that are like, well, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm like, well, you got to start somewhere. You got to start thinking about it. And that's maybe another reason why many students choose to go to Fresno State. They feel like it's right there. They've already been on the campus. It's very comfortable, that environment, and that's okay. We want students to have Fresno State as an option. In fact, we make all of them apply to Fresno State, whether they want to come or not. We do that application together with them their senior year. So we definitely, want them to think about it. But I would say for during this pandemic right now, focus on your grades. And if you're a junior, those AP tests that are going to be coming up.
Okay, let's see here. I'm trying to see here. It's worth mentioning some majors offer a high number of paid internships as well as program-specific scholarships that can help pay for school. So some do. That's
Wait,
true.
what? Oh, okay, yeah, it's true.
It's true.
True statement, thank you. It says it
It's
on-
true. It's a statement. Got it.
Yeah, so some colleges do offer internships and help to, pay for college. I know my son's a sophomore at Fresno State, but he's getting things to be an intern next year as a junior, and that can help pay for Fresno State. Okay, next question. Looks like Ms. Fernandez answering that one. Do you have any college information on Oregon University about anything by chance? So definitely just check with your counselor about that for specifics. Mrs. Bird, how many colleges have you been to that you've been on trips that they've recruited you to come visit?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I even got flown out to Abu Dhabi, NYU, Abu Dhabi. I didn't even have my passport had expired, and I basically had to expedite it in 1 month so I could go on this trip. And but I've definitely been at least to 100 colleges that I've been invited to, and a lot of colleges work together and they team up to get these to recruit counselors to come. So they call them consortiums, and so they get them, and then they send invites out, and so essentially they all expenses paid. They fly me out to visit their schools, and I come back with all this information. So if you ever walk in our counseling waiting room, all those pennants that you see in there, those are all the different colleges for the most part that I've been to, because every time I go, I pick up a pennant and bring it back. So all those colleges are ones that I've been invited to at some point or visited. We also like to take students on college tours too. So that is something, we went last year, we took a couple of students to go see classes in the Bay Area. So I am planning, when this whole thing ends, we're going back out to see some colleges. So definitely in the spring next year, I think we could plan a college visit and maybe go see some Southern schools. And it's usually an overnight trip, which, we go see 5 or 6 colleges within 2 days, and get admissions, tours and everything. But yeah, definitely, if you want to know the full list of all the colleges I've seen, I have it. So I can email it out.
And that's great, because then our counselors have firsthand experience about these places. And what's also great too is that many of our alumni, I know Mrs. Bird is working with an alumni group of our students that want to be able to be a resource to our students that, for example, have gone to UC Riverside, UC Irvine, and to be able to say, hey, have these students get a hold of me, and I will talk to them and tell them about my experiences at these universities, which will be really great.
Our alumni love to talk to future students. They love it. So whenever we even go on these college visits, I always call our alumni, and they come out and they meet our students, and they tell about did UHS prepare me because of this, and they're able to really connect the dots for students to see real students from UHS went to these schools. So that really does help. And, so Mrs. Fernandez both have access to our alums that are always willing and ready to talk to our students about, the opportunities, the experiences that they've had. So, yeah.
And then just to mention also, Mrs. Bird is not able to see the question, so she's been able
No, I'm sorry. I can't share
that's
screen.
And then, so Mrs. Fernandez has been able to answer some of the questions in the Q&A. So just so you know, that's how we've been kind of sharing the duties here a little bit. Any more questions that we can answer for you, please put them in the Q&A. Lots of knowledge here from our counselors.
And we really appreciate your time. I know it's a Tuesday evening and you probably
Homework. There's probably homework.
There's probably homework, we know. And parents too, I'm sure you're exhausted from a long day, but we really appreciate you coming and hearing this information with us tonight.
Okay, well, we will stay on for a few more minutes if we don't have any more for the presentation, but if you want to stay on for a few more questions, we will stay on, but otherwise you are free to log off. Thank you all for coming. We'll stay on and definitely answer any questions that you have.
And we love all of you, and we think about can't wait for the day we're all back on campus.
Thank you. And we are working on that too, by the way. Okay, here's a few more questions. Will the current juniors have any opportunities to go on college tours before applying to schools? Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, if things open up and I can get a fall, because I like going on fall tours versus spring tours, I would definitely, I was just trying to see how it goes, and if fall's a possibility, I will work it out and we will do a fall tour. But I was just thinking we need a little more time, so it may be spring. I want to make sure everybody's back in somewhat normal capacity before we really plan it, but it would probably be in October if we did do a fall, because that seems to be the month that that we usually end up going. I think we did October this last year, so that's usually the month we go.
I saw this question. I thought Mrs. Fernandez answered it, so that someone asked it again. But the question is just being about, will bilingual increase your pay? It really just depends on the job that you're at. But I can tell you, there's so many times I wish that I was fully bilingual. I'm kind of poquito bilingual, but I'm halfway bilingual. But if you have that opportunity, definitely take it, because it is not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you.
Yeah, and that's what I said in that the one I answered, and I think it's probably the same person who asked the same question, but it just depends where you're working. And I did say if you stay here in the Central Valley, of course, that's going to be a plus. Taking that extra year of Spanish, our students basically just are required to take that junior year because they'll fulfill those language requirements their junior year. But if you continue, you can actually qualify for our state seal by literacy. And so we always encourage students to continue. And again, you won't lose by taking another language, another class your senior year. So I would say if you can do it, go for it.
A lot of our students that have continued on with Spanish specifically and stayed at Fresno State were only a few courses away from a minor in Spanish. And so even maybe not, if that was something just again to make yourself a little more marketable, in a job search, certainly that could go a long way. So many of our students have gone on to get a minor in Spanish. So because they were just a few courses away from that.
I think it's 2 because
Yeah.
I believe it's six classes you have to take for that minor. I have that minor, and so I took AP Spanish in high school, and then when I came to Fresno State, I was able to actually get a minor because I only needed like 2 classes after my APs, and so, anyways, that is a great opportunity. The other question here is there any information on elite colleges in California from the counselors? So Stanford and UC Berkeley. I'm not
Like they want information about those two, or?
Yes, any information on these colleges, Stanford and UC Berkeley.
Yeah, we have lots of information. I mean, and in the mix there too is always USC. So it's not just, Stanford and USC are probably the 2 biggest private schools that, and then you've got more of like Harvey Mudd and Caltech that you might have seen rolling across that screen. So those have all been schools that I would say any of those Claremont colleges as, and then of course UC Berkeley. But in terms of information, I mean, their websites obviously hold a lot of information. I don't know specifically what you would want to know about those schools, but that would be something to ask in your conferences that we end up having, or reaching out to us specifically if there's certain information you'd want. But do we get students in those places? Yes. And like I said, if you look at our application history of where our students go, it's Fresno State is the #1 and the #2 is UC Berkeley. So those are the 2 that always get the most of our students in terms of admission. But
of one student this year so far.
Yep, for Stanford. Yep. And the year before that we had 2, and the year before that we had 3. So definitely Stanford is a school that our students do get in. But we can give more detailed information or even talk a little bit more about that in a conference.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you, we appreciate that.